Welcome everyone to First Things First Early Childhood Summit 2020. We have a short welcome before our featured guest. So sit back and just relax and enjoy your experience today.
Hello, I'm Marilee Delpra, CEO of First Things First, and it is my extreme honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 2020 Early Childhood Summit, our first virtual summit. 2020 is a year of extreme challenges, and the COVID pandemic has profoundly changed our lives, impacting the way we live, work, and interact with one another. We have all been affected in distinct ways, with some suffering tragic losses of loved ones, friends, and colleagues. For that, we are deeply sorry. Whatever your own personal or professional circumstances may be, I hope that you are managing well through this difficult time, and just as importantly, prioritizing your own physical and emotional health. For more than a decade, First Things First has hosted a live two-day summit, offering dozens of opportunities for participants to learn, share, and grow. When the COVID crisis gripped our state, we knew it would be impossible to bring hundreds of early childhood practitioners, experts, and champions together in person. But we also knew that just as the needs of young children and their families were growing and changing, so were your needs as professionals and advocates working on their behalf. So in addition to changing our format to a virtual one, our incredible team at First Things First and our partners like Read On Arizona carefully designed the content to ensure that each session offers timely, relevant information that you can put to use right away. As always, there are many people to thank, including our sponsors. Today's event would not have been possible without the generous support of Freeport-McMoRan, Helios Education Foundation, Salt River Project, Kaplan, Magellan Cares Foundation, and Lakeshore. These organizations are generous supporters of First Things First, and in addition to their commitment to offer support to those working with and for our youngest children, they have also given generously to help families, schools, and communities across our state. Thank you all for your big hearts. As I mentioned earlier, we worked very hard to offer you a day-long program that meets your immediate needs for information and resources. After today's event, you will receive a summit evaluation via email. Please take a few minutes to share your thoughts and perspective with us. Your feedback is crucial to our ability to develop future sessions that will be inspiring, informative, and actionable for you and your colleagues in the field. And of course, to help us with the planning for our 2021 event. I hope you enjoy today's summit and that you find the information useful in your work. Thank you once again for taking the time to be with us today and for the essential work you do every day for young children throughout our state. Your first featured speaker, Rachel Wagner, is coming up next.
And it is my pleasure to introduce Rachel Wagner. Rachel is a national speaker and author of Flip It, Transforming Challenging Behavior. She travels the country as a lead trainer and early childhood mental health specialist for the Devereux Center for Resilient Children, DCRC. Wagner is also the co-author of Your Journey Together, Building the Resilience of Children and Families, and the Devereux Resilient Leadership Survey, DERLS. Rachel travels the country speaking to groups on topics related to social, emotional health, and resilience. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. Take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's the beginning of the summit. I'm so excited for all of you to be here. I am so excited to be a part of this. I know it is not what we planned. I was prepared to fly to Arizona from upstate New York, where I am joining you today. And instead, we are making it work, aren't we? So welcome, everyone. We will be digging into a topic called Flip It today. And before we do, as I've already been introduced, just a couple things you should know about me are that I started out my career as a preschool teacher. And as a preschool teacher, I fell in love with children who used behaviors that were challenging. And I decided to get a degree in social work, and then I committed my career to the social, emotional health and resilience of young children, their families, and the adults who educate them. So that is just a little bit about me. I also have 4 fantastic kids in my life, and 3 of them are in my house right now, trying to be very, very quiet. And that is our life, right? That is our life in this moment. And so I just want us all to just welcome each other and to take a deep breath and to acknowledge this moment that we are in. I know that each one of you who is joining today is uniquely positioned to be experiencing this world in your own special, challenging, difficult, and beautiful ways. We are living through a pandemic. We are living through a call for racial justice. We are living through trying to educate our babies and our children in ways that we have never done before. And I just wanted to thank you all for your service and your work and your dedication and your commitment to being here today, to continue your own growth. I hope that it fills you up. You deserve it. And I am just grateful that we get to be together in whatever way we can. We'll take what we can get these days. So let's dig into our topic. Our topic today is called Flip It, which is 4 supportive steps to help children identify their feelings, learn healthy self-control, and to reduce challenging behavior. Now, in the little bit less than an hour that I have with you, I want to pack in a lot and give you as much sort of meaningful information as I can. I want to start with the story of how Flip It began. I'm going to give you some basics, and then I'm going to talk about something that I call ick and related to COVID-19. And then we're going to talk about how we use this Flip It strategy with kids, but also how we can use it with grown-ups and how we can use it with ourselves, because it seems very timely that we ask ourselves to do that right now. So let us start, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to start with the story of how Flip It began, which was almost 18, 19 years ago at this point. I was working in a therapeutic preschool. And the therapeutic preschool, the criteria to come to our preschool program was you had to be expelled from 3 other preschools before you came to us, which meant that the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds who came to us had really had difficulty being successful in any other setting. And so I'm going to tell you about a little girl who came to therapeutic preschool who I will call Haley. And when Haley came to therapeutic preschool, she had been expelled from 4 other centers, 4 other programs. She was 4 years old and had been expelled from 4 other centers. And just to describe to you a little bit of Haley's personality, I would walk in the morning and Haley would just, from wherever she was in the room, she'd sort of look up at me and she'd look surprised, sort of surprised that I maybe came back. And she'd pop up from wherever she was and she'd march over to me and she'd put her little hands on her hips and she'd look up at me and she'd go, "Rachel, what are you doing here, you fat, feeble female?" Fat, feeble female. Though there was another F in there, but I'm going to leave that one out, okay? But that is how I was greeted every morning. And then she would kick me or slap me, or her favorite thing to do was to try to rip my eyeballs out. And that was every morning. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't easy to walk in the door every morning knowing that I was going to be greeted by Haley. And we didn't just have Haley, we had 12 other kids just like her. And we were a well-funded staff, we were a well-funded team, but the children that we worked with had experienced a lot in their lives, right? A lot in their little lives. They had experienced abuse and neglect. Haley was in her third foster care placement because of her challenging behaviors. She was in placement with a lovely elderly couple who was about ready to say goodbye because her behavior was so very challenging. And so we felt like we were trying everything. We felt like we were a well-funded staff. We were great. We were therapists and special educators and just fantastic folks and really good ratios, which isn't always easy to come by. And I just sweat every day. Every day I just sweat, chasing kids, getting beat up every day. And then I came across a resource that inspired me. And the resource that inspired me is called the Devereux Early Childhood Assessment. And I give credit where credit is due because that is where Flip It was born. So Flip It came from this idea that we wanted to build resilience in kids. And as I started to cobble this together 18, 19 years ago, I realized that when kids are having a challenging moment, they're having a feeling. And more often than not, we are not talking to them about that feeling. More often than not, we are saying, stop that, don't do that, put that down. And so we need to be starting by talking to Haley about her feelings. And while it's okay to have feelings, the next thing we need to do is we need to do limits. And limits is the boundaries, because while it's okay to be mad, it's not okay to rip people's bleeping eyeballs out, right? So we have to find sort of the balance. We have to have a feeling and then a boundary. And then we moved on to this idea that we wanted to engage children in the thought process, in the thinking through of coping strategies. And so we moved on to the inquiry step, which is the question step that asks kids to think. Think through your own challenges. I think we're often very quick to solve things for kids. And then the last step was to offer prompts, offer solutions, offer different options so that we can find different ways to cope. And so I'm going to tell you what a flip sounded like for Haley, because it didn't work perfectly the first time, but it gave me a focus. It gave me an anchor. And so here's what it sounded like. Ready? I'm going to use sort of multiple visuals here. So here's my little cue cards. So when Haley was having a difficult moment, she would charge me and I would still block, because you still have to block. But then instead of saying, we don't do this here, or this is a peaceful school, instead of doing some of the things I always did, I instead said, Haley, you are so mad. And the first time I said that, she froze. She sort of stopped dead in her tracks and was like, you just sort of labeled something inside of me that hasn't been given a name before. You're so mad. And then I move on to a limit. Remember, we agreed we're going to keep each other safe. We had classroom rules. She had been part of making them. She had agreed to them. So I just said, hey, remember, we agreed we're going to keep each other safe. So what can we do with that mad? What can we do with that mad inside of you? And of course, when you start asking inquiries to kids who've never been asked to think through their challenges, they're not going to know. So then we move on to prompts. And my prompts for Haley were to try to find some other ways to cope. So I want all of you to think for a minute. How do you cope with your mad? What do you do when you're mad? Is it healthy? Do you go for a run? Do you call a friend? Do you take deep breaths? Or do you eat a sleeve of Pringles? Guilty. So what we do with our mad is not a one size fits all, right? What we do with our mad has to be uniquely customized and hopefully healthy for each person. For Haley, when I got to prompts and we were trying to help her figure out things to do with her mad, I knew based on her history that she needed touch. I knew that she needed physical soothing. So I said, Haley, can I rub your back? And she said, no, bleep off. Okay, we got to keep trying. Prompts aren't easy. I said, Haley, can we blow some bubbles to take some deep breaths? And she said, no, bleep off. And I said, Haley, how about we go for a walk? Maybe we should go for a walk. And she said, no, bleep off. And I said, well, Haley, what if I roll a car on your back? Maybe that'll feel good. It'll calm you down. I'll roll a car on your back. And she said, no. But she didn't tell me to bleep off, which meant that she kind of knew she needed touch too. But she needed to sort of get it in the ways that felt safe to her. So I offered her a variety of different prompts. I'd say, Haley, how about I roll a car? No. How about we get lotion and we'll put lotion on your hands and try to get your hands peaceful? No. How about I brush your hair or comb your hair? Sometimes that can really calm you down. No. But I knew based on this little one's history that she needed touch, she needed soothing, she needed that support. And so one day out of desperation, I had done the whole flip. Oh my goodness, Haley, you are so mad. Remember we agreed we're going to keep each other safe. What can we do with your mad? Should I rub your back? No. Should I roll a car? No. Should we do the lotion? No. Should I comb your hair? No. And then I said, well, how about I scratch your feet? And she said yes. So rule number one, only offer prompts you can live with, right? So I didn't have a problem with this. I was happy to do whatever she needed. And what I learned in this moment is that she's a genius, because what she knew is that she needed touch, but she kept me at a distance. I had to do her feet, so she sort of kept me at a distance. But when she took off her little socks and she gave me her little feet, she started to melt. She started to get that regulation she needed. So now we have something that's working. We know that it's soothing to her, like maybe a bubble bath is soothing to you or going for a run. We know that what's soothing to her is having her feet scratched. I was happy to do it. Trust me, I was sweating bullets most days. I was happy to scratch some feet. And so we did this over and over and over again. And her foster parents did it over and over and over again. And eventually, with consistency, friends, with consistency, all I would have to do is start the flip. And I always start my flips with, oh my goodness, honey, you are so, and I wouldn't even have to get to mad. And she'd go, I know. And she'd take her little socks off. Check that out. Her automatic reaction to mad used to be what? Used to be trying to get my eyeballs out. Now her automatic reaction to mad is to take off her socks. And I'll never forget, one morning I was doing circle and she wanted to go get called on first. I didn't call on her first. And I was ready. I had my arm up, sort of ready to block her, because when I didn't call on her first, she'd charge me. But I didn't call on her first. And she popped up out of her seat. She looked like she wanted to charge me. Instead, she turned herself around. She went to the cozy area. She took off her socks. She laid out a pillow. She laid herself down and she stuck out her feet and she waited. She waited like 20 minutes, because that's real life, right? I couldn't get to her for 20 minutes. She waited. And that is when I realized that this is a process of learning that requires a lot of support initially, but once kids get it, life gets easier and we can peel back the scaffolding, right? This is scaffolded learning. It's a lot of support. And then once they learn it, we have to pull back. So how do we pull back? How do we make it so I don't have to go to college with Haley and scratch her feet? So what I did is I went out and I got her one of these. I got her the most magical, wonderful foot scratcher in the world. And I introduced it like it was the most exciting thing in the world. And I presented it to her like it was so special. And she took it like, for me? And we practiced using it and she loved it. And so Miss Haley started to scratch her own feet. And what she was able to do was fantastic. It was amazing. And Miss Haley took a foot scratcher to kindergarten and the kindergarten teacher used it, and Haley made it through kindergarten, and Haley made it through first grade, and Haley made it through second grade. And in second grade, that elderly couple, those foster parents who started out with us on this journey, went forward with adoption. And so I'm not going to stand here and say, or sit here and say in Zoom land, that Flip It saved our lives or did all of the things that needed to happen. Haley had a big plan, a big comprehensive plan. But what Flip It gave me in that moment, in that sweaty, getting beat up moment, was focus. And we all need that focus. We all need that opportunity when we're sort of tongue-tied and flabbergasted. We all need something to go, oh, I'm going to start with F, then I'm going to do L, then I'm going to do I, and then I'm going to do P, right? And what I know across this great land is that we're really good at doing two of these steps. We're really good at doing the L, and we're really good at doing the P. We say, stop that, do this instead. And we kind of miss the F and the I. So let's talk more about that. Let's get into the basics, sort of the basic things I want you to know about this strategy. Flip It can be a one-day training, and I'm giving you sort of a highlight reel, okay? So what do I want you to know about this strategy? What I want you to know first is that relationships are the foundation of everything. Strategies are only as good as the relationships they are built upon. So when our relationships are not good, the flip doesn't go as well. And I'll never forget, I did a Flip It training once for bus drivers in Michigan. And a couple weeks later, one of the bus drivers called me. She was kind of mad at me. She's like, this Flip It thing doesn't work. I said, well, tell me what you're doing. And she told me her flip, and it sounded beautiful. She had all 4 steps perfectly done. But she didn't have a relationship because bus drivers have a hard time finding ways to sort of make connections with all the busyness that is happening. And so we worked out a plan for her to have some connection rituals, some ways that she greeted this little one on the bus that connected them, some stories that they shared. As that relationship built, the flip got better. And so relationships are the foundation of everything. The only way we can learn is in the context of healthy and safe relationships. And Flip It is about learning. It's about learning about the hardest thing, about our feelings. And so we need a safe relationship to do that. I hope you can hear that Flip It is most certainly a targeted intervention. It is a strategy you can use with kids who are already exhibiting some challenging behaviors or who have trauma or risk factors in their lives. But I also hope you can hear that it is a strategy that can be used for little things, like the annoying little things, like he took my pencil, those kinds of things. Because if we use it for he took my pencil, what that does is it helps us practice. It creates a culture where everyone knows we're going to follow these affirming steps. And then when the real hard thing happens, like he's stabbing me with a pencil, you'll be ready because you've practiced and the kids have practiced and they've all gotten used to this process. So use it for minor so you're ready for major, right? Use it for minor so you're ready for major. A couple things that I always like to let people know is that Flip It is best practice made simple. It is nothing new. It is everything that is old, good, wise, and well-researched, just packaged up in a way that I can remember. So I am just a teacher with a learning disability who took all the great research and color-coded it and put it in an acronym so that I could remember what to do when a child calls me a fat, feeble female, because it's kind of hard to find your words in those moments, right? So it's best practice made simple. It is a strength-based strategy. It is common sense, effective, portable, easy to remember, which is important, and easy to share. This strategy was designed with teachers and parents in mind, that everybody who is in the world of a child should be able to share this strategy and be consistent with this strategy across the board. It is applicable in a variety of situations. It's important to me that Flip It works for the child who steals a pencil. Flip It works for the child who stabs with a pencil. Flip It works for the child who's running down the hall with a pencil. I want Flip It to be applicable in a variety of situations. And I want people to be able to remember that it is 4 simple steps and that it is supported by the research. So one of the things I'm not going to spend a lot of time on is to just let people know that Flip It is supported by the research. When it was first created, there was a very strong literature review behind each one of the steps. Each one of the steps by itself, just F, just I, those are evidence-based strategies, but just by themselves. But in 2016, the University of Michigan in Ohio decided to do a research study where they were going to, sort of see what happens when caregivers get trained on Flip It and then use it. So all the caregivers in this study in 2016, I said University of Michigan, I meant University of Miami. All the caregivers in this study attended a one-day Flip It training from a certified Flip It trainer who I trained. And what they found was this: after caregivers attended a one-day training, they followed them for 6 months to see what happened. And what they found was that within child protective factors, the good stuff we know kids need in life to be resilient in life, those went up. And they also noticed that behavior problems steadily decreased in the 6 months following Flip It training. The study also found, and this is my favorite part of the study, that Flip It helped to build bonds. It helped to support and engage the child and caregiver relationship. So if you do Flip It, you're supporting stronger relationships. And that 100% of the participants reported positive outcomes, and that 92% felt like that Flip It fit into what they were already doing, which is a big deal because we in early care and education get asked to do a lot of things. We use a lot of different resources and assessments and curriculum and rating scales and all kinds of things. And Flip is just one little baby strategy that fits within a lot of things. So if you're using conscious discipline or second step or DECA or any other social emotional tool that's based in research, Flip It will fit very nicely within a bigger system because it's all based on the same good research. A few disclaimers that I always like people to know about Flip It is that it is not the only strategy you should use. It may not be the one that you use in every moment. It should be used in combination with other great strategies. It requires consistency. It is not magic. It did not work the first perfect time with Haley. It took some work. And that for children with more involved behavioral needs, like Haley, you're going to need mental health professionals involved. We were involved not just using Flip It. We had a comprehensive plan wrapped around this little girl that had attachment work in it, had all kinds of things. Flip It was just one part of the plan. So please know that Flip It is not the cure-all. It is one part of a big picture. Now, let's talk for a minute about something I call ick that relates a lot to something we all now know as COVID-19. And so what is that? Let's start with this. One of my favorite quotes. Read it with me for a minute. Read this quote, take it in. Children haven't changed, but childhood most certainly has. And I've been sharing this quote for 10 years, and it meant something for the last 10 years, but this year, this quote means something even more, right? The childhood experience has dramatically changed in the last 10 to 20 years. How children play has changed. Children's sense of safety has changed. Our sense of family has changed over the last 20 years. But in the last 6 months, the childhood experience has dramatically changed. And so we want to just sort of let that wash over us. It's a lot to take in. And the way that I sometimes think about it is in terms of this idea of ick. And so I have some ick that I'm going to sort of pull out here. Before COVID, I saw children who used behaviors that were hard for us. And I said, wow, they have a lot of ick in their lives. Haley had a lot of ick in her lives. The definition's up here on the screen, but it's basically all the trauma and risk factors and hard things that happen. And so if we've got a child, this is Haley maybe, and we know about her life, we know that she is weighted down by a lot of challenges. She had experienced a great deal of transitions and abuse and neglect that weighted her down with ick. It's very hard to function when you're weighted down by ick, right? And so ick can come from a lot of places. It can come from the environment. It can come from our family systems. It can come even from within ourselves. I was born with ick. I was born with a learning disability. It's ick. It's in my life forever. Doesn't mean I'm doomed, and people who have their ick in their lives are not doomed. but we have to find coping strategies. I had to find coping strategies for my learning disability. Thank goodness I was born to a reading teacher. My mom was a reading teacher. So my ick did not spread. My ick didn't go away, but it stayed contained, right? So that's what we want. We want to contain ick for kids. And different kids can handle different amounts of ick. And I know kids with tremendous amounts of privilege who have tons of ick. Because when you're watching a lot of violence on TV, or you're consuming a lot of media messages that tell you about your worth in this world, if you are overscheduled or trying to live up to some ideal, that creates ick too, right? And so the key is to acknowledge that ick happens. Kids have ick, little, lot. It can affect their behavior. And our job is to find ways to contain it. Now I'm using the word contain because ick is also COVID-19. Ick is COVID-19 and we want to contain it, right? And if you had ick before COVID-19, COVID-19 compounded it, right? If you had difficulty with finances before COVID-19, COVID-19 compounded it. If you had ick related to maybe a health issue, COVID made it harder, right? So COVID is ick by itself, but it also makes our pre-existing ick even bigger. And so when we think about our kids, when they have ick in their lives, they usually do one of two things. They do what I call a flip in, or they do a flip out. And so a flip in is when kids sort of take all their ick and they hold it inside. You know kids who hold their ick inside? These are kids who internalize. These are kids who maybe are under the table, not flipping the table. These are kids who become withdrawn, or kids who refuse to participate or engage, or even kids who harm themselves. And what we know about kids who flip in is that they need just as much help as the kids who are flipping out. Because what happens when you hold in your ick for too long? When you hold in your ick for too long, well, most of you are probably thinking to yourself, it explodes, right? And that is true. When we hold in ick for too long, it eventually explodes. Or it starts to rot us from the inside out, right? So when we hold our ick inside, it starts to give us back pain and health issues and sleep problems and tummy aches. And so we know what it feels like to have sort of ick that we hold, the stress that we hold inside our bodies start to attack our bodies, right? And so we want to pay attention to our kiddos who are flipping in. And then, of course, when kids have ick, they do another thing. They flip out. They take their ick and they share it with the world. This is more external behavior, right? This is flinging your ick around the world. This is hitting, biting, slap, kicking, all of it, right? This is when kids take their ick and they share it. And we see a lot of kids probably flipping out more now than ever before. And I know that many of you who joined us today are in that place of worrying about so much ick for kids. And are they flipping in and are they flipping out? And how can we support them? We're going to talk more about that. But I first need to acknowledge that adults have ick too. And we simultaneously right now are feeling this. So we're trying to help kids with their ick and we have our own ick. We're trying to do so much, swimming through so much ick. And so I want you to take a moment and think for yourself. Are you a flip-in or are you a flip-outer? As a grown-up who's got a lot of ick going on right now, we all do in different and unique ways. How do you cope with your flip? How do you cope with your ick? Are you somebody who holds it all inside? Are you someone who sort of internalizes it all and has back pains and stomach troubles and then eventually like lashes out after you've held it in for too long? Or are you somebody who's feeling the flip out more right now, who is snapping more and getting really irritated more easily than you ever have before? Or are you both? Different approaches for different people in our lives. So lots of people say I sort of flip in at work, but I flip out at home. We do it all, right? We do it all. And so right now, whether you're flipping in or flipping out, I want to tell you it's okay. There's a lot of ick right now. And we need to be practicing a whole lot more self-compassion, because this is an unmanageable amount of ick. So we have to take some time to focus on ourselves. We have to take some time to notice what's going on with us and what's going on with the other grown-ups that we're working with or living with. And that requires us to have empathy, empathy for ourselves and empathy for others. And the simple definition of empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Like, that's the goal, right? To put ourselves in someone else's shoes. When we're talking about kids, it's the ability to honor a child-sized problem. So whether you're teaching kids or caring for kids or supporting parents who are caring for kids, or you have a house full of kids yourself, we are really needing to honor child-sized problems and remember that sometime in March, their whole lives changed too, right? Sometime in March, their whole lives changed too. And so the process of Flip It can be very helpful. The process of doing the feeling step gets us to that empathy place. So let's read this definition. The definition of the first step of the Flip It process is right here on the screen. Read it for me for a minute. Just take a minute. Gently talk with children about their feelings and what you're seeing and hearing as a result of their emotions. Now, what you're seeing and hearing is a little bit more. I haven't shown you an example of this yet, but to say your face is red and your fists are clenched, we're describing what we're seeing, because it's so important. It helps you get present when somebody notices you. It helps you get in your body. And so we want kids to get in their bodies. We want them to get present, so we notice them. We tell them what we're seeing and what we're hearing. We don't evaluate it. We just tell them what we're seeing and hearing. And then we try to identify the feeling that's happening. And so we want to get to the root. We don't just want to talk about behavior. And so look at this visual with me. You see this tree? We got a tree here. We got feelings at the root. We've got behavior that grows from feelings, right? So when you look at a tree, you don't see roots, you see leaves, you see behavior. When you look at a child, you don't see feelings, you see behavior. And so it is very easy for us as grown-ups to react to behavior. We talk to kids about behavior all day long. We say, use your walking feet, use an inside voice, use gentle touches. I want to see kind hands. How about you share it? Trim, trim, trim behavior. And we all do it, right? Do you hear yourself in that example? I hear myself in that example. So we all do this. We all talk about behavior. And when you trim a tree and you just address behavior all day long, A, you're tired, but B, the roots are still there, right? B, the feelings are still there. And if we don't get to the root, we will not change behavior, and the behavior just grows back. It just grows back, and lots of times it grows back stronger than it was the day before. And when there is ick at the roots of a tree, when children have ick, it will grow up through that trunk, and we will see it in their behavior. And so it is important for us to remember that all behaviors are feelings to be understood. So anything a child is doing that may be frustrating or annoying is a feeling, right? And so I hear so often I hear people say, oh, he's just doing that for attention. That's a feeling. Wanting attention is a feeling, and I try to encourage people to replace wanting attention with wanting a relationship. He's doing that because he's wanting a relationship. And that sort of changes things, and it helps us get more to the root of what's really going on, right? And so after we notice that there's a feeling behind this behavior, it is important for us to have boundaries around it. It doesn't feel safe even as grown-ups, to have a bunch of feelings and have no boundaries. And so what do? We're going to remind children the positive limits and expectations we have for their behavior. I have a few tips about limits. Most of you all are very good at the limits piece. You understand already that limits should be positively worded. We try not to do all the no's, don'ts, stops, can'ts. We try to say more affirmingly, use your walking feet instead of no running. We say, instead of no yelling, we say use your inside voice. So limits should be positively worded. When possible, they should be kept simple, especially in a flip. It's not the time to explain the limit. The limit should have been reviewed during a non-challenging moment. So in the flip, limits are simple, not big explanations. They can be based on familiar rules. And so keeping ourselves safe, keeping each other safe. If you have house rules or classroom rules, the limit will work in that part of the flip. Limits can also be descriptive. They can tell you more what you're wanting. We use gentle touches, we use kind words, we listen with our eyes and our ears. Oh, here's a hard one, friends. Limits should be stated without using the word but. Now, when somebody says to me, Rachel, I know you want potato chips for breakfast. You're craving salt. That's the feeling. But you need to be healthy. What does the but do? The but makes me want to punch somebody. The but makes me feel like my feelings actually didn't matter. It's like having an apology with a but. Like, I'm sorry that happened, but you made me mad. The but really ruins everything. So we are going to try to replace but with and. So we're going to say, I see you're really and we keep each other safe. You really are craving potato chips for breakfast and you're trying to be healthy. These two things have to live together in our bodies, right? We constantly, that's what adulting is. Adulting is living with feelings and limits every day of our lives. And so we need to embrace the and of it, which, oh, aren't we doing that more and more? And right now, I am anxious and hopeful. These things have to live together. They don't negate each other. And then the last tip I have for limits is that we want to review limits with kids during non-challenging moments, right? They need to know what we expect when their brains are really ready to receive that information. So the first time they hear a limit should not be in the flip. They should know what you expect. Before you go for a walk, talk about what your rules are. Before we go outside or to grandma's house or any of these things, especially now with COVID-19 and all the rules, we want to review them during non-challenging moments. We want to practice wearing face masks. We want to practice social distancing in non-threatening moments, right? And then when we are in the moment, we have to do the flip, the limit will be familiar already. So after we do feelings and limits, we move on to inquiries. And inquiries is where we invite children's brains to the table. So let me ask you this. Inquiries are where we ask open-ended questions. Do you think that right now we are raising kids who are going to be good critical thinkers and good problem solvers and are going to be able to sort of think on their feet in a crisis? And when I ask this in live trainings, people are like, I'm not sure we are. I'm not sure we're raising kids who can sit in the discomfort of a problem and solve it. You know, even in our own house, I often find, you know, when we're struggling with something, my kids will say, Google it. And they don't sort of ever tolerate not knowing an answer. And so last week, my kids went camping and they wanted to create a trap for a chipmunk that was eating all of the stuff in their camping gear. And they kept asking Dad to Google how to make a chipmunk trap, but we're camping. So no Google. And my boys spent hours constructing and figuring out how to rig some little trap for a chipmunk, and they used their brains. And oh, an important lesson. And so we want to invite children's brains to the table by asking them open-ended questions. What can you do with that mad? How can you build a chipmunk trap? How can we solve this problem together? And then once we've asked the question, especially kiddos who haven't had a lot of practice, we have to follow up with prompts. And those are our suggestions and our clues and cues and ideas, which we're very good at. Most grown-ups know, oh, we'll set a timer and we'll take turns, or, you know, I have an idea for how you can build your trap, or this is how we can put it back together. We have all the ideas, but now instead of doing them first, giving all the solutions first, now I'm asking you to wait till fourth. I'm asking you to do FLI, feelings, limits, and inquiries, before you offer any suggestions, strategies, or ideas. Whew, it's sometimes hard, right, to pull ourselves back. And so here's what I know. This strategy was created for kids ages 3 to 8-ish, right? But what I have learned is that Flip It also works with our fellow grown-ups. It also works within ourselves. Flip It works with our babies and our toddlers. Flip It works with children with special needs. That this is just what people deserve. People deserve to have their feelings acknowledged, to learn what the boundaries are, to be engaged in thinking, and to be offered different options, because one size doesn't fit all. We all deserve and need this. So in the time that I have left with you, I want to run you through what a flip might sound like right now in COVID-19 life for a child. And then what it might sound like for COVID-19 life to flip a fellow grown-up. And then we're going to talk about flipping ourselves and how valuable it could be to lock yourself in a bathroom for 3 minutes and flip yourself. And so let's start with a kid example. I'm going to do a kid example related to screens, because I think that we are, as a society, seeing younger and younger children be more and more attached to screens, that COVID-19 life has made us all more dependent on screens. In many ways, good ways, it brought us together today, but in many challenging ways for children and their development, right? And so I know a lot of parents, and I know a lot of teachers who are struggling with some screen obsession, some screen, maybe even addiction. And so let's imagine that you need to take a screen away and a child melts down because you are taking a screen away. And I know a lot of parents can relate to this, on the home front, right? We can relate to this a great deal. And so the first thing we want to do is, when a child's sort of having a meltdown about a screen, is instead of just saying stop it or find something else to do, we need to acknowledge that there is a feeling. There's something going on there, and it's not just sort of bratty, I want. I would actually say that the feeling is more akin to addiction, right? That we are very connected to our screens. We want them, we desire them, we crave them, and the ways that games and shows are created for kids, they're on a never-ending cycle, right? Where it's never over. So it's very hard to end. It's very hard to close things, because that's how it's created, to never end. And so the feeling is akin to addiction. And we have to acknowledge that for kids. I have to do it with my own kids. I have to say, wow, you're craving a screen. That's the feeling. You're craving a screen. It soothes you. It makes you feel better. It numbs you out. You're craving that. And then there's a limit. And the limit is, I need your brain to grow, right? That's my limit. We need your brains to grow. And so the inquiry is, how can we find fun and awesome ways to make your brain grow? And this is not easy when a screen is so easy and tempting and makes our lives sort of easier sometimes. But if you don't know other ways to make your brain grow, then we have to go to prompts, and we have to find other cool things. And so when this pandemic happened, we had to up our creativity, right? We had to find all the things we could do to make life interesting. And we had to pull out crafts, and we had to do Legos, and we had to not just do Legos, we had to do Legos on steroids. We had to increase the challenge level to keep it interesting, more interesting than a screen. Which sometimes, you're hearing me right, friends, the flip requires us to do a little more work. The flip requires us to, maybe when we get to pee, sit down and do a puzzle, or sit down and do Legos. But if we really want to help a child who's literally struggling with addiction to a screen, we're going to need to be all hands on deck until this, and this is happening right now in my house, until they learn how to engage their brains in something else that is awesome. And so I have a 14-year-old right now who is doing little perler beads all by himself, because at the beginning of this pandemic, we did it together and we found and fell in love with it. And now he's passionate about it. Maybe not as passionate as he is about video games, but it's a start. It's a start, and I'll take it. So let's talk about flipping our fellow adults. You may be living with some adults you want to flip, right? We may be in relationships professionally that may benefit from a good flip. And so I'm going to use a home life example. Let's say you and your partner are not getting dishes done, and you are getting incredibly frustrated with, you know, really when for my husband, I'll just say when he's on duty and the dishes don't get done, I get pretty annoyed. And so I could just say, why didn't you do the dishes? And as soon as I say why, he feels blamed, shamed, and defensive. Instead, I have to notice he's got stuff going on too, right? He has stuff going on too. There might be a reason why the dishes aren't getting done. We need to get to the root of the behavior. The behavior is not doing the dishes, but the root is that he's overwhelmed too. And so to say to your partner, you are overwhelmed too. You are coping with a ton of ick too, is a great way to start. Way better than starting with an attack. And the limit is, think about this, the limit is the boundary or the standard you set. And so the limit might sound like this: we're in this together. That's the limit. We have to be in this together. It's us against the world. How much better of a limit is that than you have to do your fair share? Right? So the limit should be positive. We're in this together. And then the inquiry is, are there ways we can balance this out? Are there ways that we can accomplish all that needs to be accomplished with all the things that are on our plate? And then, because we're grown-ups, we can problem solve and prompt together, right? And I will tell you, in this house, what we figured out is that our kids can do the dishes. Our brilliant idea, once we stop the madness, stop the chaos, stop the hecticness, the brilliant idea was, oh, we have able-bodied children who are completely capable of taking on shifts of doing dishes, and they do. But we didn't think that through. We took on all the burden ourselves instead of thinking it through. So the minute we think it through, we come up with better options. These are all very simple and sort of minor challenges that I'm presenting because it's a 1-hour webinar. But I hope that you can see how if we're able to apply it to the minor, that we can get to the more sort of major issues using this strategy as well. And then the last thing I want to just sort of put out there is that we can flip ourselves. It's a great way to sort of soothe and talk yourself through a process. And so let's imagine you are also a parent, you are a teacher, you are a family support provider, you're a coach, you're a mental health consultant, you're a center director, you are a home visitor, you are all the things, and you are also a parent who may be responsible for some homeschooling of your own children. And you are feeling a lot. And the first thing that we need to notice is that the feeling is that you are feeling called to be a superhero. You are being called to do more than what is humanly possible. The limit, you're human. That's the limit, you're human. And so how can we do all of this? How can we make this possible? And if you can't find an answer, you might need to phone a friend. You also might need to phone a therapist. If it's too much, you might not, and you can't answer the I, then you might need help. So reach out to friends for help and ideas. When this pandemic first hit and I had 4 kids at home and a full-time job and a husband who was an essential worker, I was pretty overwhelmed, to the point of wanting to crawl under the table, overwhelmed, and really flip in. And then I locked myself in the bathroom and I took myself through this process. And what I got to when I got to the prompts was that for us, school was only going to happen on the weekends. Because in our life, I don't have self-directed learners and they weren't going to be able to do school without my help. And I couldn't help them during my workday. So I just said, school has to happen on weekends. And we made that work and we were okay with that. We did some, whatever they could do independently on their own, great. But that was our truth. And for some of us, that might not even be our truth. And so we might even need to go further outside the box, further outside of the realms of possibility, because compassion for others begins with kindness to ourselves. And we all need to give ourselves a tremendous amount of grace. And to remember that while we may be inclined to flip in or flip out, there is a choice. And the choice is actually to flip it. We can flip anything that we previously flipped in or flipped out about. And so remember that there is a choice. And the last thing I will say before we open the floor up to questions is, may you be proud of the work that you do, the person you are, and the difference you make. I am so grateful to each and every one of you for finding a way to be here today, for finding a way to commit to your own learning and to commit to children in whatever ways are possible right now. I believe that folks who work in the field of early care and education do the most important work on the planet, and nobody understands that but us. But I see you, and I'm grateful for you. And I hope that you know how important you are and take good care of yourselves. And so with that, my friends, I would love to see if any questions from all 3,000 of you came in through the chat box. And my friend Deanna is going to help me to sift through some of those questions and see if I can answer a couple before we bring it to an end.
So Rachel, you've had a lot of participation in your session, so that's been wonderful to see. And one thing I do want to let you know, or let everybody know, is that we will have a recording of the session on the Summit website, probably in about a week to 10 days. And the handouts are also located on the website. So some of you have asked about the handouts. Those are listed there. It can answer some of those basic questions that you have. So you should have received them by email, but if not, go back to the Summit website. With that, we had a question from Joanna. She has a friend whose daughter scratches herself when she doesn't get her way. And they've tried talking to her in timeout, doesn't seem to be working. How can Flip It help?
It's a good question. And what I always say is that I'm not sure Flip It is the only answer. So I will give an example of how Flip It may be helpful, but it may not be the answer to this situation. But what we always have to sort of ask ourselves if a child is harming themselves is sort of, where is it coming from? Sort of what is the root of that behavior? And it could be not getting what you want, but it could be bigger than that, right? And if you're willing to hurt yourself, it's probably bigger than that, which may be, I don't feel powerful in this world. I don't feel like I have enough choices or enough say in how things happen for me, right? So getting to the root isn't always easy. It's not always what we see on the surface doesn't always tell the whole story. So the first suggestion I would say is to sort of go much deeper. Go much deeper. It's not usually about the conflict of I wanted this or I need this, but something deeper than that. And if we only solve the situation and we don't solve the feeling part, we won't see it return over and over again. So I would say dig deeper, and then find a boundary, which is we want your body to be safe. We love you. And then the inquiry would look something like, what can we do when you're feeling this frustrated or powerless or overwhelmed or whatever is really at the heart of that? And it might involve giving her more choices, giving her other outlets for her feelings. But we have to, again, like one size doesn't fit all, really get to what's custom for this child. And so, like I said, Flip It may not be the thing that gets to the heart of this matter, but it could help if we sort of really dig deep into the feeling step. I hope that was helpful.
So another question that came in was, how many prompts do you give? They can, you know, if you have a kid where you ask a lot of questions and it raises their anxiety level, how many prompts do you give? Is there a limit? Any guidance there?
Sure. I think it's different for every child, and you know the kids best. So if you find that the prompt isn't working, or if you find that the prompt is creating anxiety, my rule is, if the prompts aren't working, go back to feelings, because there's probably a new feeling. So when I start to say, you know, is there a way we could talk about feelings that will make you feel more comfortable? And a child, you know, or if I'm saying, you know, I see you're mad, what can we do with your mad? And I'm offering you a bunch of different things, and you're like, no, 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 no. Usually there's a new feeling, which is that you're not ready to move on, or the mad is really strong, or talking about feelings is uncomfortable. And so anytime the prompt doesn't feel like it's clicking, we might want to be better observers. We might want to sort of really try to tap into what may work for the child. But usually if we go back to feelings, we'll find our way. So anytime your flip flops, go back to feelings.
I know we are pretty much out of time right now, but a couple of people have asked about training for Flip It. Where is that available? Is it online?
We have all kinds of, there is an online self-paced course for Flip It, then there's also webinars, and right now we're not coming to programs, but we are doing online pieces. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to www.moreflipit.org. So moreflipit.org, and you will find everything you need to know.
Thank you, Rachel. Fantastic presentation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. I hope you have a great day, everyone.